Thank you. I usually talk a lot, but not when there's so many people around, so I'll try to be quick. Yeah, I came up with the idea. I just thought he was such an influence on everybody, like many lives. And I've got a couple of stories, and as somebody said earlier, it's about the journey. And the journey from Hard House to here with Portage in his canoe, I've got a million stories. It's just phenomenal. I'm going to tell you a couple of them. First of all, though, I would like to thank my wife, Monica, for supporting me in this. It, it was a good idea when I first thought of it, and then and then it evolved, but it was quite a trip. I mean, that was a trip in itself. So here's a couple of short little vignettes from the Portage from Hard House to here. Today, actually, we had the eldest portager and the youngest portager. And the eldest was 82, and the youngest was 6. She put the canoe on her head with her mom at the front, and she's at the rear seat, and they carried it. Yeah, and they've got their signatures on the paddle. And there's a couple of people that portage the canoe, they didn't get to sign the paddle, and I think they're here today. Make certain you do it after this. And it was interesting, 82 plus 6 is 88. That's how old Kirk was, I guess, when he moved on. The other thing is, when I came up with the idea, it was like to carry a canoe. Then I was looking for a canoe. Swift Canoes donated the canoe. They built it like last week. Picked up on Wednesday. It's a fantastic sort of, very light, which is great. And there's been talk of auctioning it off or raffling it off, or Tim, who will be speaking right after me, he and I were with the canoe the whole way, and we got talking, and I think there's more value in this canoe than just auctioning it off. I think perhaps something could be done where an education program is set up. It can be taken to school boards and across the country, or maybe the canoe could be portaged across Canada, starting in Newfoundland, and take a year to do it. And canoeing groups and wilderness groups or school boards or whoever could take it bit by bit. So I'm just planting the seed. I'm not going to organize it. The fundraising side of the portage wasn't even a secondary or tertiary idea. It was just sort of, it was there. I thought, okay, well, maybe we can raise some money, for the portage in donations. And if anybody wants to donate, we have forms that we will have down when you're having snacks at the break, and you can contribute to either the Kirk Wipper Award at U of T, which is a bursary to students for outdoor education, or the Canoe Museum. And as I said, those forms will be down in the dining hall. And then James mentioned earlier a circular life, and here's one of the stories from the portage. Yesterday, at the end of each leg, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I thought, instead of putting the canoe back on my van and taking it back home to Toronto and then bringing it back to the start, maybe I could find a place to store the canoe. The first night, the Thursday, it was Nora, who lives on Williamson Drive, and knocked on the door, and I just told her what we were doing. She says, yeah, sure, leave it in the garage. And she actually then, the next day, carried it the first 500 meters, signed the paddle. The next stop was a little country road. I forget the address, but it was you couldn't see it. There's beautiful greenery in that. Drive up this driveway, and in behind all these trees is this huge warehouse, and the fellow fixes trucks, like transport trucks and stuff. It's called the truck shop, and he was a great guy and left the canoe there. And then yesterday, the last stop, last rest for the canoe before coming to the museum, it was Springville, 10 kilometers from here. And I'm driving through the town. I thought, well, where can we leave the canoe? And I'm looking around, and I saw there was one car at the Springville United Church. I thought, oh, church has lots of space. Let's go check that out. So I I go into the church down in the basement and say, hello, hello, and I hear in the kitchen, there's a fellow, and I'm actually sort of welling up here because this is, scary. I said, hi, reportaging a canoe on behalf of Kirk Wipper, and looking for a place to store it. I wonder if we could, leave it down here. And he said, well, yeah, we're having a fundraiser in the hall in the basement. They had all the tables set up. They're having a dinner that evening. He says, but look, come upstairs and bring it into the church. And he says, you can put it on the pews at the back. I said, okay. I said, well, we'll be here at 11 to get the canoe. I said, what time does your service start? He said, 10. I said, oh, okay, that's going to be all right there? He says, yeah, don't worry, it'll be fine. Anyway, so I go back to where the canoes were walking with it, and Jen from the museum here, she's somewhere, she was there helping out, and I said, yeah, so we're going to leave it at the Springville Church, and the fellow's name is James Payne, P-A-Y-N-E. And Jen goes, what? And I said, yeah, because the very first canoe that Kirk purchased for his collection was a dugout canoe made by the Payne Canoe Company or whatever in Warsaw, Ontario. And I said, what? I drove back to the church. I went and I said, did your family make canoes? He goes, no, we're not from here. And I forgot that Jen had said to me Warsaw, Ontario. And because when I got back there, he said, no, we're not from this area, we're from Warsaw. And I was thinking Warsaw, Poland. So I went back to Jen, I said, well, no, he's from Warsaw. She said, no, it was Warsaw, Ontario, that was it. So even if he's not related directly with the Paynes that built the canoe, I think that's the full circle. Is the first canoe Kirk got was from the Paynes. The last place where this canoe rested before it came here was in the United Church, and it was a Payne that allowed it. And that was, amazing. I get chills, So that's it. And the people that haven't signed the paddle, make certain they see me. And Anne, this paddle's for you. Okay? Thank you.
I'll start off by saying my name's Tim McDonough. I love a canoe. I have lost a friend, my friend Kirk Wipper. I missed his funeral, but I had to walk for every footstep of everyone he touched. His friends from Canada, his friends from UFT, the Tai Chi International Institution was one heck of a little group that portaged the finishing of the first day. Our friends from the museum joined us another 2 days in. Our friends from Bartlett Lake joined us in the last day. But Kirk has left us much that you don't know about. As Neil was saying about the fundraising, you only mentioned the University of Toronto. But on these forums, there is also your choice of donating to the museum here. I'm just adding on his forgottenness. Short, he had too much to think of it. Okay, I met Kirk at a symposium where Kirk spoke on after the first leg of the Mackenzie expedition. He was the first speaker and there was a break after that. His closing statements were, there should be more expeditions like this. Well, not knowing this gentleman, I approached him with 4 newsletters. And he returned to the stage. And he gave us recognition. When you have a club for 20 years and a gentleman from the middle of nowhere gives you recognition before your community is an honor. I also reenact a number of expeditions. The Detroit-Hooverville expedition in '95. I've called the Voyager's Cry that echoes from every stream, lake, river, mountain, peak of this country for historical buffs to come together. And we had Kirk on the Great Abitibi, as though it was the beginning of time. We returned the following year, repeating the Voyager's Cry. What's come from that is amazing. You'll never know. I'll give you a tip. There's 5 women that joined us in '95. 3 didn't know how to swim. I was a speaker at Voyager Days. They asked, can they join me? I had 3 North canoes. I took another North canoe. 2 of them were teachers and said, I don't know how to swim. I said, don't worry about it. Just do what you're told, wear your life jacket, and we'll go slow. And in Mackenzie's log, the Talon Chutes is probably the worst portage because of the rocks. We didn't have to do it, but we made the other portages. One of the women, she did not make the year 2000, but her last words were, the trip down the Mattawa was the best thing she ever done in her life. These women started the first chapter of the Women of Out of Doors of the Ohio chapter. They made a video of 13 minutes, ended up in the Vice President's wife's hands, and to this day I can announce that the Women of Out of Doors of the United States have a chapter in every state. Kirk has also influenced me in many ways. We had one parcel of land at the time that Kirk would visit me once in a while, me and my canoeing partner, Mike Shortsey. And he come across to me one day at a symposium where I was just sitting there. Kirk just got up before everybody else, 800 people in there, and said, you're having lunch. So of course you have to get up, and Kirk said, let's go. So I went with Kirk, and I threw it across to him. What would he feel like if we named our center after him? Well, he was more than proud. So these are things, and there are many more I consider all day, that you don't know about Kirk. Kirk has left me many things, offered me many things that I refused. Come back to the canoe before I leave. The suggestions of raffling it off, a winner could win it, that doesn't have a clue where this came. In my eyes, it's not proper. To auction it off to a higher bid, it's, again, I don't agree with. I'm not a rich man, and there's many of us that aren't, that would love that. So the other suggestion was, is put it on the road. You know, Kirk, if you belong to a group, organization, an association, or affiliation, it would be like a Millennium capsule, but it would be open. We all leave an education package in this canoe and let the canoe travel, as Kirk is. I'm recognized as the James Bay canoe promoter. Some people think it's a joke, but to me it's an honor. From my friends at Samuel Champlain Park and the Friends of the Mattawa, the Love of Australia, it's an honor. James Bay canoe owner, well, I don't think there's nobody in the James Bay. It promotes our history, our canoeing and water safety more than I do. I'm not being conceited. As I leave, my final notes to my friend that has passed. My friends in front are listening, Kirk. For those who give a hoot, don't pollute. What you take in, you take out, and take out more than what you took in. Leave nothing but footprints. Return to nature. Respect the land. Watch the stars. Get the reflection from the sun. Let it go through you. Return, look at your shadow, and Kirk will be there. Thank you.
It's a great, great honor to be here with friends, family, and my own family here. And I had to think of what can I say that could bring Kirk alive in my own words. I had to bring a couple of props. One, old one, a piece of poop, or a heap of pipe. Pipe of peace, I believe, as Kirk would say. And something new here. There are many stories I could share with you, and some stand out more than others. I've seen Kirk in his combat mode. I've seen Kirk in quiet times, and I've seen him in a boardroom full of producers and directors. And we were flown to Montreal to talk with the directors of the Grey Owl movie, and we sat at the table, and Kirk and I had gone over the script, and Kirk spoke in his very quiet voice that you can't produce this movie. And there was silence around the table. And the first scene, of course, had Pierce Brosnan vaulting his cedar canvas canoe over a 40-foot waterfall. So to Kirk, that wasn't really the authentic note that he wanted to portray as the the Canadian icon. And Diana Hawkins looked at Kirk and reprimanded him, and she said, "Mr. Wipper, Mr. Wilson, this is not a documentary, it's a Hollywood love story." Of course, she's saying this love story to a man who had a repertoire of love sonnets and poetry that could make any woman's knees buckle. And Kirk looked around the table, and you could feel that vice grip clench. Everybody waited for Kirk to answer. And I thought that time that Richard Attenborough was going to serve everybody ice cream. But Kirk calmly but firmly said, "This will not do at all. This has to be an authentic movie." And they changed the script because of that sentiment that Kirk showed around that boardroom. There are other adventures that I could go on about. And being on the Thelon with Ann and Kirk during one of the worst summer windstorms. I think we paddled 2 days of the 14. And spending much time with Kirk in a tent, listening to his songs and his poetry and his love sonnets. And I think that was the magic about Kirk, is that he could meld into any situation and any environment and find the magic in it all. Getting back to this pipe, this piece of pipe of peace, was I remember Kirk coming up to the cabin up on Lady Evelyn. I'm sure some of you have been there. And Kirk came up because he heard that I was cutting firewood for the year, and he just wanted to spend some time, and because he loved tomogamy. And after a very violent late spring thunderstorm, we noticed that the storm was moving to the north. Very dark clouds, still lightning could be seen in the distance. It was getting dark, so we took our chairs to the north end of the cabin, leaned them up against there. I think we had some kind of screwdriver that we were sharing, and he saw me pull out my pipe, and I said, "Well, do you want to have a pipe with me?" So I went back to the main cabin, pulled out a pipe, which was already filled with tobacco, so I just handed it to him. And we sat there watching the northern lights come out just as the storm was fading. And Kirk was reciting some story or some poem that just became more profound and more profound. He says, "What is this tobacco? It smelled a little like sweetgrass." And I just remembered that the friend who had the pipe before him had left it filled with weed or something. There's some wacky stuff in there that wasn't quite tobacco, and I didn't really want to interrupt Kirk's story because it was a bit of magic unfolding right there as we I swear to God, Kirk disappeared at one moment and reappeared, and he said that was the best piece of poop I've ever had. But I wanted to do a paddle, and I just wanted to capture Kirk in a pose that I was so used to seeing everybody, I think, was so used to seeing. I'm sure he would say something about condoms on paddles. But he would say something like, well, at least the paddle won't get pregnant. I don't know if you can see that. Kirk was an avid photographer, and he'd probably have something to say about large lenses, but it would have nothing to do with photography. But it's something I'd like to donate to the museum, along with the other paddles. And thanking, again, Badger Paddles for the donation of the paddle that I could paint. And just like to say, in maybe paraphrasing Albert Einstein, the mystic realization of spirit is worth dying for. And Kirk certainly saw the magic in everything, and truly one of the greatest people in my life. And thanks for that honor of just getting up and sharing.
Good afternoon, everybody. I met and exchanged words with Kirk Wipper on only a couple occasions. I was fortunate to do that. Having joined Paddle Canada just a mere 1.5 years ago, I'm new on the scene. So I come today to speak words on behalf of those that knew and worked with Kirk over the years. These are the Paddle Canada directors, both current and past, all of its national members and volunteers, and the provincial regional members. At a CRCA meeting in 1975 in Winnipeg, Kirk Wipper first appeared to Paddle Canada, CRCA then. He was a unifying voice for a modern paddling program, including Canadian history and culture. He was also known at those gatherings to be the first to do a headstand from the gunnels of a canoe. 1989 to 1997 was a significant time for the CRCA organization, and there was Kirk as president for all those years. He had a vision to consolidate the canoeing program into a single national accepted program that still exists today, along with a very vibrant sea kayaking program, river kayaking, and now stand-up paddleboarding. Paddling is for Everyone, now called adaptive paddling. That program came into light as well. The Home for Canoeing, the development and the construction of the Ron Johnston Paddling Centre in Merrickville, Ontario, also came into light during those years with Kirk as the leader. Kirk masterfully obtained CRCA's, or he facilitated CRCA's annual meetings held across the country. Great opportunities at those meetings to meet and paddle together and share experiences and learn from each other. And that is where I first met Kirk in 2009 at one of these gatherings. A fundraising auction was always part of these gatherings, and Kirk masterfully was the auctioneer and often overbidded everybody else on all the items. His continuing efforts to have us all involved, to all pull together, and despite our regional differences, highlighted Kirk's obvious passion. He always ensured that a safe recreational paddling opportunity was available to all Canadians, and front and center, the canoeing heritage theme, the CRCA pillar, was there. There was always amazement with the extent and the diversity of Kirk's travels across Canada and around the world promoting paddling to everyone. The collection, the paddling craft collection around us, first viewed at Camp Candelore, where his observers could clearly see his passion. The board and the volunteers struggled with Kirk as he moved the collection and migrated it to its current home here today at the Canadian Canoe Museum. And I am told by some of the directors that touring the museum's collection with Kirk was a rare experience. One learned all about every nuance of each and individual craft and where it came from, the construction, the background of all the jewels in the collection. Imagine the scene when Paddle Canada's Canoe du Nord with Kirk on board arrived in Old Fort William in July 2008. The brigade had just paddled all the way from Rocky Mountain House in Alberta. And this trip commemorated the 200th bicentennial celebration of Canadian explorers David and Charlotte Small Thompson. Kirk was the keynote speaker at that arrival ceremony and was even seen dancing at the Governor William McGillivray's Great Ball later that evening. Kirk's energy was and continues to be an inspiration to us all. Kirk never stopped playing an active role in the Paddling Canada organization. His keen interest was always there in the ever-evolving path of the organization, and he was always ready to praise, encourage, and counsel. Paddle Canada would not have been or continue to be the same without Kirk's sharing an infectious passion for canoeing. Paddle on, friend, we will remember you.